Today we will hear a talk on steps 4 and 5 with a focus on resentment. Please give a warm welcome to Lindell V from Las Vegas, Nevada. Welcome, Lindell.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Desiree. Hello, everyone. My name is Lindell. I'm a recovered alcoholic and a grateful member of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, practicing the principles of the program as outlined inside the Big Book in the first 164 pages. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to anyone who's newer than myself, especially anyone counting days within the first, second, or third meeting ever. That's really the person I'd like to really talk to today. You know, most of us have been around the rooms for a while. We're familiar with the Big Book, and we know everything about the book, right? We know everything about the program. So it's like the preaching to the choir, right? Um, Bill said in a letter that he wrote in 1942, when we give a share or we share the message, it should be an adequate description of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and this we owe to the newcomer, right? They're not the most important person in the meeting, though. That's a misnomer. Neither is the old timer, right? The newcomer is the lifeblood of the program, though, right? Because the newcomer is the old timer of tomorrow. You know what I mean? They're here to continue to carry the message, right? As we old timers die out or die off. Um, I do have a home group. I have a sponsor. I have a service sponsor. I'm a three legacy individual, right? That means I belong to a three legacy lineage. I practice all three parts of the triangle in equal proportions to the best of my ability. Um, I work with others. So today I sponsor and I'm willing to sponsor others. And I'll put my information inside of the chat in case anybody would like to fellowship, right? Or if I could be of sober service. So if you're new, welcome. And I'd like to let you know that you just crossed, huh, well, I don't want to say crossed because it's a threshold, right? But you just tapped into a source of power much greater than yourself. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the fourth step and the fifth step. Um, but before I do that, it starts with the first step, right? Because if I don't know what the problem is, there's no solution, right? And I used to think that the problem was alcohol. I used to think that the problem was a lot of things other than what the problem was, and the problem is me. The problem is centers in my thinking, right? Alcohol was my solution, right? And the hope of the newcomer, um, and I said the hope of the newcomer is to have an effective spiritual experience sufficient enough to bring about freedom from this illness. And one of the very first spiritual guides I had told me that if what I'm suffering from is of a spiritual nature, then the question was, what makes me think that anything other than a spiritual solution will heal me? Notice I said heal. I didn't say fix me. I said heal me. It's a difference. This is an internal job, right? Um, so this first step is really important because it's the foundation of our program. And if I don't get a firm foundation, or if I'm not firmly grounded in step one, I'm going to be honest with you. In my experience, there's no need in taking the other 11 steps. There's just no need, right? Um, I used to think that if I ask a newcomer and I say, "What's the first step in recovery?" They usually point to the sheet on the wall or the shade on the wall, and they mimic what they read, right? Which is, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. But according to the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous on page 30 in chapter 3, more about alcoholism, it says that I learned to concede to my innermost self that I'm an alcoholic, right? This is the first step in recovery. So there was a lot of things that I thought I understood about the program that I really didn't understand until I got a sponsor, someone who had been through the process of recovery in the first 164 pages and had a working knowledge of the steps and had an understanding of the Big Book um, that could walk me through these pages word by word, line by line, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, with a dictionary, right? Um, I couldn't really receive the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. I read the book. I tried to read the book like a novel. My first drink was when I was 8 years old, right? And I'm a real alcoholic. I'm the type three. I'm not your moderate average temper drinker. I'm not your hard drinker. I may have passed through those stages, but from my very first drink, I drank alcoholically, and I'm a blackout drinker. And I drank off and on for 58 years, and alcohol became my master. So Today, I didn't, well, before in 1985 is when I was introduced to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had a friendly nudge from the judge. I was sent to the Bertolano Club in Hawthorne, California. And when I got to the club, I was walking up the driveway and I saw a bunch of Harley Davidsons, a bunch of salt and pepper white guys, their hair salt and pepper, and they had a bunch of Harley Davidsons and they were wearing a bunch of leathers and you know what I mean? They had these chains connected to their belts and their wallets. And I was like, oh man, the judge sent me to the wrong place. I got nothing in common with these people. They were all tatted down. You know what I mean? They had, and I was like, wait a minute. But anyway, I was court committed and they said, are you here for the meeting? And I said, yeah. They says, well, you're in the right place. So they shook my hand, they gave me a hug, they invited me inside, they told me to grab a cup of coffee, get some cookies, something, and have a seat on the front row. It was a speaker meeting that day, right? And so I sat in front of the podium. And one of the suggestions that was given to me is that, you know what, you're new, but I suggest that sit down, listen with an open mind, take the cotton out of your ears and stick it in your mouth, right? So that you could hear the message of recovery. And immediately they read from chapter 3, more about alcoholism, and they read from chapter 5. And I don't know what it is. I didn't know what an alcoholic was. I was 25 years old and I couldn't possibly be an alcoholic, but I definitely identified with the language. I understood words like incomprehensible demoralization. I understood that once I put one in, I couldn't stop. That was my experience. Nobody had to tell me that, right? And that's what happens for me. What makes me an alcoholic, this is an illness that's of a twofold nature. Some people think it's a threefold nature. Even though the spiritual component is important, it's not diagnostic of the disease of alcoholism. Even non-alcoholics suffer from a spiritual malady. So I have a twofold illness, right, of the body. Once I put alcohol of any form inside of my system, I develop the phenomenon of craving. And once I start, I'm unable to stop. And the second component is a mental obsession, an idea or a thought that outweighs all of the thoughts or ideas. Okay. Um, so that first step, right, was very important for me because until I could admit, concede, and then accept the fact that I'm an alcoholic, right? And I told you again, that took 58 years to be able to come to that conclusion. I was 25 when I came to the rooms. I was 63 when I finally uh, came all the way in, sat all the way down, and did the work. Because I had two choices. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out of my consciousness, my intolerable situation as best I can. That's why I love my home group. It says choices. And that's what I came to, that fork in the road where I had two choices. And the other one was to accept spiritual help, to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools that you people have been trying to lay at my feet, pick up that 600-pound ink pen and put it to the paper so that I can understand what was wrong with me, right? I could uncover, discover, and discard those things which were blocking me from the sunlight of the spirit and keeping me in bondage to myself. So we're here at the fourth step, right? Um, there's some things I want to share with you. I'll go real quick because um, I had a concoction of resentments, right? When I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I started drinking when I was 9, but I experienced childhood trauma when I was 8, and really, for a long time, I thought that's why I became an alcoholic. I didn't know that I didn't have anything to do with me being an alcoholic, right? Right? But I thought that that's why I became an alcoholic. It might be part of the reason why I became an alcoholic because it's the way I reacted to the things that happened to me in my early childhood years. But it had nothing to do with me being an alcoholic, right? Um, so I tried to tell my mother a year later about this trauma, and she denied my reality. So I developed this resentment with my mom, and I divorced my mom mentally, right? And I separated from God because I was raised in the church, Southern Baptist, right? And God was all powerful, all knowing, omniscient, omnipresent, all that stuff, right? And I said, well, if this guy is all of that, then how could he let something like that happen to a little guy like me, right? I'm totally innocent. And I thought that there was something wrong with me. I became disconnected. I disconnected from God. I disconnected from my mother. I disconnected from people. I disconnected from society. I disconnected from the world. And as I continued to grow in my recovery, right, I didn't know that I was growing in my recovery. I look back and in hindsight, I can see that God had his hand on me the whole time, right? Or what I like to call my higher power or God of my own conception. Um, I'd been through 30 programs, last count, right? Three mental institutions, right? 6 month stays, um, 4 point restraints. They taught me a new dance called the Thorazine Shuffle. I had countless 72-hour holds. I was badly mangled by the time I got back here November 5th of 2020, right? So for 58 years, I drank off and on, suffering from this insidious illness, right? And there was no answer. There was no solution for me until I came to the rungs of Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, I found out that my mother denied my reality because the same thing that had happened to me as a child had happened to her. And my mother had five different sisters, and it had happened to all five of her sisters. So you just know right now that my resentment list, right, grew exponentially. I developed resentments with everybody and everything because you guys knew that he had a problem and you left me in his custody, in his care, right? And he altered and changed my life. Now, you know what? The steps have given me the spirit of forgiveness. I've had to learn to forgive my mom. I've had to learn to forgive my uncle, those people that had harmed me. And I'm in the process still today of learning how to forgive myself. Because I'm going to tell you the things that I experienced, what we call in the big book, the incomprehensible demoralizing behavior, right? Which means that once I put alcohol of any form inside of my system, I will do just about anything that comes to the forefront of my mind. That includes sleeping with men. You see, I'm only as sick as my secrets. I don't have secrets today. My life's an open book because I don't know what I say is going to help the next person. You see, I lived in secrecy all my life, right? So what happened was there was a story because it tells us on page 112, read this book. And in the preface, it tells us we hope that you may pause in reading one of the 42 personal stories in the back of the book and ask yourself some questions, right? And so I was able to answer those questions. And I went to one of the personal stories in the back of the book that's on page 551. And I'll start here. I'm just going to read briefly. It says, I've had many spiritual experiences since I've been in the program, many that I didn't recognize right away, for I am slow to learn and they take many guises. But one was so outstanding, I like to pass it on whenever I can and hope that it will help someone else as it has helped me. As I said earlier, self-pity and resentment were my constant companions, and my inventory began to look like a 33-year diary. For I seemed to have a resentment against everybody and I had ever known. All but one responded to the treatment suggested in the steps immediately, but this one posed a problem. And it says, this resentment was against my mother. Wow, right? They say to listen for your story. Sometimes my story is in the book. The book is me. I'm all throughout the book. So it says, this resentment was against my mother, and it was 25 years old. In my experience, it was 35 years old. But this particular individual, it was 25 years old. It says, I had fed it, fanned it, and nurtured it as one might a delicate child. And it had become as much a part of me as my breathing. It had provided me with excuses for my lack of education, my marital failures, personal failures, inadequacy, and of course, my alcoholism. And though I really thought I was, and though I really thought I had been willing to part with it, now I knew I was reluctant to let it go. One morning, however, I realized that I had to get rid of it for my reprieve. They talk about that daily reprieve in steps 10, 11, and 12, right? Step 10, right? That's all I get is a daily reprieve contingent upon my spiritual condition. So that's why I have to practice the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12 in my life today to the best of my ability every day, right? That 10th step tell me that I've entered the world of the spirit, right? And my next step is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. And that it's not an overnight matter, but should continue throughout my lifetime. So once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. I'll be doing this program one day at a time for the rest of my life. But the difference is today, I loved the program with Alcoholics Anonymous. I love the steps. I love the traditions. I love working with newcomers, right? Giving away what was so freely given to me because what I received is a gift and I try to pass that gift along. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous, in my personal opinion, is a gift from God or my higher power. And what I do with the program is my gift back to my higher power. So it says, for my reprieve was running out. And if I didn't get rid of it, I was going to get drunk. And I didn't want to get drunk anymore. Wow. So now I want to take you to page 64 because it talks about resentments on page 64. And it tells us this. It says, resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease. For we have not only been, or I have not only been mentally and physically ill, I have been spiritually sick. But it gives me some hope because it says once the spiritual malady is overcome, then I straighten out both mentally and physically. So again, if what I'm suffering from is of a spiritual nature, what makes me think that anything other than a spiritual solution will heal me? You see, I was broken when I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was a wounded child. I had become a victim, and I played the victim card very, very well until I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and I began to go into those programs. And I began to discover things about this disease. But I didn't get recovery until I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Beat down, tore up from the floor up, needed a checkup from the neck up. I was badly mangled when I came to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had brain damage, I had heart damage, I had kidney damage, I had liver damage, I had lung damage. I was 20, well, I don't know if I was 24 hours, but the doctor said I was hours away from being placed on life support. And my kids were going to have to make a decision to disconnect me because I had so much toxicity inside of my system. My body, all my physical organs were shutting down. So I'm the real alcoholic. I'm the low bottom. And not that you aren't, because it doesn't matter if you come from Park Bench or Park Palace, right? Right? An alcoholic is an alcoholic. And it's what happens to me. It's not what I drank, who I drank with, how much I drank, how long I drank. It's what happens to me when I drink. And once I start, I can't stop. And apart from divine help, I'm doomed. Right? So God did an intervention on me. So if you're new, I want to wish you the gift of desperation. I want to take you down to, let's see, page 67. Well, let's go to 66, right? It says, this was our course, right? Or this was my course. It says, I realized that the people who had wronged me, my uncle, my mother, a lot of different relatives in my family, the people that had wronged me were perhaps spiritually sick. Though I did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed me, they, like myself, was sick too. You see, I didn't know I was sick. But the forward to the first edition tells me that the alcoholic, right, is a very sick person. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic, the person is a very sick person, is a very sick person. I'm the last one to find out how sick I was. Everybody else knew. So I had to do a lot of work, right? And I was listening to one of the speakers by the name of Mark H, right? Mark Houston. And he was talking about step one. And one of the things he said was interesting to me because he said, and I wrote it down because I wanted to share with the group. It says, if you have not done a lot of work with inventory or around the fourth step, my sense of self is always derived from external things outside of myself. And that's why everything impacts me. So when they tell you that this is an inside job, right? Money, property, and prestige, right? Women, cars, jewelry, which is nothing more than crack coupons or whatever I want to use them for, right? Right? Relationships, all of those things are external, right? Today I'm learning to have a relationship with me, right? And I'm learning to have a relationship with my higher power. That's the most important thing in my life today, my conscious contact with my higher power. And I pray that I never lose my conscious contact with step one, because if I lose my conscious contact with step one, right, then I lose my conscious contact with my higher power. And then I drink again because I rest on my laurels. I become restless, irritable, and discontent, as described in the doctor's opinion. And I seek that sense of ease and comfort in a drink. So I'm subject to drink again. And that's why I'm real clear that all I get is a daily reprieve today, right? Um, so I want to share, that was page, I kind of wrote things down a little bit. So 67, we did that. And then I want to turn to page 552, right? And then I'm going to switch over to the other part of this pitch I'm giving you guys. Um, it says resentment. He said, in effect, if you have a resentment and you want to be free of it, if you will pray for the person or the thing that you resent, you will be free. If you will ask in prayer for everything you want for yourself to be given to them, you will be free. I don't know how many times I've had to say that prayer because I really couldn't see how I was going to forgive this man. I really couldn't see how I was going to forgive my mother. And when you people said I needed to look at the part that I played, that's misinformation because that's not what the big book tells me. The big book tells me that I need to see the mistake I made. And the mistake I made was my mother said if an adult ever told me to do something that I didn't agree with or I felt was wrong, that I was to let them know if I was ever left in the custody or of someone else. And because he instilled fear and intimidated me, I felt I couldn't say anything. So I held on to that secret for a whole year until I felt safe enough when that person was far removed from us that I could say something to my mother. But by then, right, there was no proof. He was gone. My mother just thought I was seeking attention. So I carried this anger, right? This justified anger around for years. So what was my part? I didn't have a part as an 8-year-old kid. My mistake was I didn't tell my mother the way I was directed to. I don't know if it would have made a difference, but let's just say I didn't follow the directions, right? Um, so now let's talk about the fifth step. Because what I got to do is I got to put down on paper, there was a 4-column inventory inside of the big book, right? And it was talking about, you know, list the resentments and then, list the causes and then what it affected. And it affected my, my self-esteem, my pride, my pocketbook, my personal ambitions, my sexual relations, right? And see, I had to do a fear inventory because a lot of this stuff was all encompassed in fear. Remember, he put that fear in me as a child. So I was afraid of everything when I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had to do a fear inventory. I had to list all of my fears, right? And I had to ask myself the question, why did I have them, right? Imaginary or real? Most of the time, I found out that they were just in my mind. They weren't real. And then I had to do a sex inventory because what this man affected, he affected my sexual relations. He took away my choice, whether I want to be heterosexual, homosexual, right? I'm a kid and I felt robbed. I felt violated and I carried guilt, shame, pain, remorse, all these things around for years. And I tried to destroy myself. I was drinking at him, but I was killing me. So um, I had to put all that stuff down on paper. And that's when I got properly armed with facts about myself, right? Um, my sponsor said that I would have to share this information with him, and I would have to be totally honest. That's that fifth step we talk about, right? And I'll switch over to page 72, because that's where it picks up on the fifth step. And I'll just share with you real quick. It says on page 72 at the bottom of the page, it says if we skip this vital step, new we may not overcome drinking, or I may not. I was taught not to read this book in the plural. I was taught to read it in the singular because it's talking to me. When it says we, they're talking about the first 100, right? And it says we share in a general way what we were like, what happened, and what we're like now. No, my sponsor says that I share in a general way what I was like, what happened to me, and what I'm like now, right? So it says, I may not overcome drinking. It says, time after time, the newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they have turned to easier methods, right? There are no easier, softer ways. Half measures avail us nothing. I got to come all the way in. I got to sit all the way down. And I got to do what that first 100 did if I expect to recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. That usually happens between steps 1 through 9 because those are the action steps. 1, 2, and 3 for me basically were conclusions. And then 10, 11, and 12 are the maintenance steps, right? That's how I maintain my daily reprieve. It's just a quick synopsis, right? Then it says almost invariably they got drunk. Having preserved, this is on top of page 73, with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. People that like me go in and out, in and out, in and out, treatment center after treatment center. And I think I'm relapsing, but I'm not. You know why I'm not relapsing? Because I've never been through all 12 steps. You can't relapse from something that you've never recovered from. The book, they talked about it in the pioneering days. They called it a slip. And the acronym for slip was my sobriety lost its priority. That's why I'm always impacted by things outside of me. I got to be careful in that first year, right? I need to really focus on my recovery and the message that's inside of this book and these steps, right? And to be of service, because that's how I get outside of myself, being of service to others, right? And to my higher power. All right. So it says, invariably, they got drunk, they failed. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. My fourth step, right? I held on to some of the worst items in stock. There were some things I did that I swore I'd never tell you people. I'm taking this to the grave, buddy. I love you. I kind of like you. I trust you a little bit, but I'm not giving up this one. And I think that if I just tell God, well, God knows, I know that's enough, right? Well, let's see what the book says about that. It says they took inventory, all right, but they hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought, and this is in italics, right? That word thought. And I got to be careful when I get a thought, right? Because my thinking ain't wrapped too tight. Left to my own thinking and my own devices, the best I do is pick up a drink. So I can't trust my thinking. That's why I got to bounce my thinking off of a sponsor, right? And it says they only thought they had lost their egotism. They only thought that they had lost their fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves, but they had not learned enough humility, right? We talk about the shortcomings in step six. We talk about, the character defects in step six and the shortcomings in seven. It says humility, and that's what the seventh step was really all about for me, humility. It says they only thought, let's see, the fearless. It says yes, they only thought they had humbled themselves, but they had not learned enough humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary. And until they told someone else all, that's all encompassing. And my sponsor made me circle that word all, their life story, right? Real or imaginary, right? It says more than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. And that's what I did. I led a double life. I destroyed a 9-year marriage, a 9-year military career, a small business. I spent over $1 million, right, in inheritance money, 2 life insurance policies. I destroyed a 9-year marriage, 2 beautiful kids who had to go to Al-Anon, Alateen, and adult children of alcoholics before I was able to get custody of them because their mother died. They're my late ex-wife, their mother, of a cancerous brain tumor. I was in Pacifica House. I was in there for 18 months. It was a 2-year program, a TAC therapy program. And when I found out that she died, I drank again. That's why I say recovery programs are only for discovery. Alcoholics Anonymous is about recovery. Um, so it says, I must be entirely honest with somebody if I expect to live long and happy in this world, right? And I think well before I choose the person or persons to whom I am to take this intimate, confidential step. You see, I need to have somebody that's a closed mouth friend. Because sometimes you tell people your information inside of these rooms, and information, I even learned this on the streets, right, is a valuable commodity and it can be used against you. I've done some things that can land me in the penitentiary for 10 years, 25 years, 15 years, right? Today, I'm free from that stuff because I've met my demons, huh? And I give them a hug every day. They don't go anywhere. I just embrace them. I've learned to embrace them. I know who I am today, but more importantly, I know who I'm not. And I'm still learning about me, so I'm growing constantly. I don't know everything. I'm learning not only I know of God, right? Or this power greater than myself, but I'm learning more and more each day to trust this power, right? We all walk down the corridor of faith, but sooner or later, I got to open that door to trust. To trust that God knows better for me than I know for myself. And so far, that's kind of that's ringing true. I got about a minute and a half here, and I think I'm going to finish on time. It says, notwithstanding the great necessity, well, basically, we want to be able to have a closed mouth friend. I want to share this with you real quick. Um, I've tried many methods, right? Many methods of recovery. It tells us on page 31. It says, most real alcoholics are not going to believe they're in that class. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, they would try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule, therefore not alcoholic, right? Today, I know I'm an alcoholic, right? But here's what it says on page 181. And this is Dr. Bob's Nightmares, the story. And I just want to share the last paragraph with you on. It says, if you think you're an atheist, an agnostic, a skeptic, or you have any other form of intellectual pride, which keeps you from accepting what's in this book, I feel sorry for you. If you think you are strong enough, if you still think you're strong enough to beat the game alone, that's your affair. But if you really and truly want to quit drinking liquor for good and for all, and sincerely feel that you must have some help, we know we have an answer for you. In chapter 5, it says, rarely have we seen a person fail. But Dr. Bob here is saying it never fails if I go about it with one half the zeal I've been in the habit of showing when I was getting another drink. And I'm going to close out with this particular story right here. It's not a story, but it's how I feel about the program today because I'm just about out of time and I promised that I wouldn't take you guys hostage. And I don't know what I've said. I'm kind of all over the place. I got woke up by one of my newcomers and you know what? They had went out and it was just a mess. I was up for 3 hours just listening on the phone, right? That's all I could do was listen. So I'm still a little bit groggy. But anyway, it says this on page 475. And the story is entitled Twice Gifted. And it says, some years have passed, and as I look back from the clarity of this moment, I know that the way here for me could not have been by an easier path. I had a hard path getting here. I didn't even know why I'm here. It's only by grace, love, and mercy. It's nothing that I did to deserve this. It's purely a gift. It says, not, it says, I would not willingly have stopped the course my life was I would not willingly have stopped the course my life was on. I needed harsh reality to see the damage that alcohol abuse causes. In so many ways, I needed to be forced into acceptance and humility. It says my physical being has certainly undergone a transformation, but the major transformation has been spiritual, right? The hopelessness has been replaced by abundant hope and sincere faith. The people of Alcoholics Anonymous have provided a haven where if I remain aware and keep my mind quiet enough, my higher power leads me to amazing realizations. I find joy in my daily life, in being of service, in simply being. I have found rooms full of wonderful people, and for me, each and every one of the Big Book promises have come true. The things I have learned from my own experience from the Big Book and from my friends in AA, patience, acceptance, honesty, humiliation, and true faith in a power greater than myself are the tools I use today to live my life, this precious life. Today, my life is filled with miracles, big and small, not one of which would have ever come to pass had I not found the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. I ended up on dialysis for 3.5 years. The hospital called me and said, Lindell, we have a kidney. And the lady had been in a car automobile accident. And I get teared up because somebody had to die so that I could live. But the bottom line is, um, I got to the hospital, they prepped me for surgery, and I was down in the basement waiting to go into the OR. And they came in and said, the organ's got damage. It's got a blood clot and it's too deep into the organ, and we can't fix it. And their surgery would be too risky. So they sent me back home. And I said, well, I'll probably go back on the list for another year or two. Well, here's how my higher power works in my life. A week later, I got a phone call. And they said, Lindell, can you be here in 4 hours? And I said, yo, what's going on? They said, well, we got two kidneys down here for you if you want them. Underwent a 12-hour double kidney transplant surgery. So instead of getting one, I got two. And they're operating perfectly. And today I can travel and go anywhere any other free man goes on God's green earth, right? Provided I follow a few simple rules: trust God, clean house, and help others. I'm out of time. My name is Lindell. I'm a recovered alcoholic. I hope that something that was read, said, or shared will help you to examine your relationship with alcohol and ask yourself the simple question: is this thing doing more to me than it's doing for you? And if it's doing more to you than it's doing for you, welcome to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you.